right, I see it.
All
We're
live.
live. We're live. We're live. We're live. Come on
We
in the
are
room.
live. This
Come
is
on in the
King
room.
Talk, and we are live. This is our 10th episode, our season finale.
Yes. And we're going out with a good one with a very special guest. Mr. Eddie Miles Jr.
Hell yeah, we are live. We are live, family. We are live.
You want to give people a minute or two to come on in here
Thank
and
you
join
for
us
the
real
family
quick?
for
I
joining
guess
us.
we'll have our faithful
This is King
Mr.
Talk
Marcus Luke,
Live.
maybe.
I can't even hear you, say. So
Hi.
you try to
You
turn
can't
down
hear
this
me.
music.
Oh yeah, that music is kind of loud, but it is what it is. It's all good. Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Cote.
No, well, thank you. Who is it? Well, I can't see. You can see who may be in here or who's not in here. If you see anybody yet, we want to welcome them here.
It's two people. It's two people that's out there right now. So I want to say, shout out to the family. Shout out to the one that was there that left. Now it's only one, but shout out to that one that's here. Thank you for joining us here at King Talk. They left too, so that's okay. People come and go. That's how it goes.
People pop in and out a lot, but yeah. Well,
right.
This is our season 1 finale, episode 10,
right.
with our very special guest here. Of course, you already know I'm Cortez Ransom, and my co-host here.
I am Alex Ayawas.
and we have a very special guest here with us today, Mr. Eddie Miles Jr., who is a marketing and advertising professional, and he's also a writer, and he is a chef who cooks from a Pan-African perspective, prepares meals from a Pan-African perspective, and he's going to share an amazing dish and some options for that dish with us today a little later. But first, we want to get into 2 or 3 maybe current events of what's going on in our community, the Black community today. We'll chop that up a little bit with the current events, and then we're going to get in there and let Mr. Eddie Miles Jr. chop it up with the knives and whatever else that he's using to prepare his dish.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what's the first topic you want to go into? I know we were talking about
the topic of the show, family, is real quick is the state of melanin Americans, the state of melanin America. Where do we stand as a people? And we use the word melanin because that is the distinct imprint of our beautiful skin as a people. In all different types of shades of melanin, and that's our universal imprint. So we just want to take a collective pulse from the family. Where are we? How do we feel about being under this new administration? Where do we want to go? Basically, that sort of a thing, and we can start pretty much anywhere. First of all, I want to say something that did happen. Is I wanted to say happy ancestral return to our brother, our teacher, author, historian, and great proponent of the Pan-African spirit, Ranuko Rashidi. He just transitioned over, and if you know about the brother, if you know about his work, he has worked. He transitioned while he was actually doing the work. He was doing a tour in Egypt, which we would call Kemet. He was doing a tour while he was over there, and he transitioned doing the work, that he loved doing. So I just wanted to give, a shout out and an honor and a great piece to that brother for the work, that he has, done for us and for our liberation and for our spiritual awareness as a people. And then also the great legacy and the rich legacy that he has left for us here. So it is, what it is. I just wanted to go ahead and say that, the great piece to that brother, Runuko, his name is Runuko Rashidi.
Rashidi. A historian like no other.
Yep, most definitely. So
Oh yeah.
we can, whatever y'all want to talk about as far as what may have really, affected y'all over the week, because anything that we
Right.
basically touch on will segue into other things, that we can, go into with where we are as a people, where we stand as a people, and where we want to go. Yeah.
Well, I just want us to be free from this never-ending twilight zone, this never-ending merry-go-round ride that we're on, um, going deeper and deeper into confusion, like dealing with this whole thing with the shot thing. You better get the shot or else. And now they're threatening people and threatening to have employers like threaten to fire people if they don't get this shot and so forth. Um, you know, and just telling people to go get the damn shot and all this kind of stuff. We need to, well, I've been saying for years we needed to separate from this. Of course, people think I'm just being mean when I say we need to separate. I'm not a mean person. I'm saying it because I care about the survival of our people. We need to
Mhm.
separate from this. We need to come together and strategize and build and create our own system and our own government and so forth. Because if we had our own government, they wouldn't be able to control us. They wouldn't be able to try to force us into taking a shot that basically is still an experiment. As you said earlier, it hasn't even been fully approved yet by the FDA. So they basically are experimenting on people, and you, I've seen real reports about how it's affected certain people's health when they started giving it to children. Otherwise healthy children were developing heart conditions and so forth, but people ignore they ignore all that kind of stuff and just say, just go get the damn shot because they're purposely putting out this lie that everybody that's getting this so-called new variant, the Delta variant, are people who are not vaccinated. And of course, they're saying that because they want to badger people into getting vaccinated, and people who are vaccinated are the bullies. Okay, some of them are being bullies. Not all of them, but some of them are being bullies. I've been bullied about it before, because somebody who was interested in me asked me if I was vaccinated, and I said no, I'm not. And he actually had the nerve to say, "You sound really stupid right now." You know, say I sound stupid because I'm concerned about my health. I'm concerned about this vaccine and what it can do to you, and I know for a fact that it has harmed people. I know people personally who it has killed. Um, so I'm far from being stupid. I just care about my health. I'm not willing to roll the dice with my life for this bullshit because the fact of the matter is you don't know how it's going to affect you until you take it. It's
I mean,
affected people
yeah.
differently.
I mean, you make a really good point about you're not wanting to take the risk or the roll of the dice, and I think that when you talk about how it's affecting our community, our people, I think that
Mm,
the reality is by the time we get to the point where the government is asking, suggesting, demanding, mandating, requiring, once it gets to those stages, we're already too late. Our problem is we don't have nation status to stand on. We have
right.
not we are unwilling to be a nation as a people, a nation within a nation even. Because
Hmm.
if we had that, then we would be in a situation where it wouldn't be about I don't want to take the vaccine because I don't know what's in it. It would be
Hmm.
about we're a nation and we have our own structures for information delivery. So we would have people whose job it was to investigate something like this virus, like this vaccine, right? Because the
Right.
reality of it is, right now, even for the people who are in the I'm not taking the vaccine camp, there isn't a high level of knowledge and understanding. A lot of it is reactionary because we're not morons and we know what this government has done to us historically. We can if it walks like a duck, it is. But at the same time, the science of it is not as well understood as it could be if we were in governance of our own people, right? If we were
Right.
unified in nation status. On top of that, that provides us power and protections. Religious communities, if there are conscientious objectors. There's a whole host of people who have exceptions to vaccines that you need to go to college with. You know, not just this radical vaccine, but any kind of vaccine. When you have nation status, then your people have the ability to decide what will and won't happen to the group, and how you're going to deal with what might happen. You know, and I think that when we refuse to unify, when we refuse to like you were saying, separate, right? Because you have to divest from white supremacy, from white America. You have to divest in order to do that, right? You can't be a nation and then also, you know, my country tis a thee. You know, you can't you can't have one leg in and one leg out.
Exactly.
But if we do that, then that's a show of power, right? That's a power move, right? There are legal protections, right? You know, there are legal protections in front of governing bodies like the United Nations, and there's, you know, documented, you know, processes for that are in process on a smaller scale. And then there's just the grassroots down home. We not messing with this white nonsense, but we have to do that as a unified group, as a nation. It can't be, well, we give lip support to it, but then when somebody's foot gets held to the fire because the man's going to come for you, then you out there by yourself, because who wants to stick their neck out? There's not going to be a whole nation of people behind them, right? You know, we don't have a good track record with supporting people who do those kinds of things. So I think the conversation is larger than just how is this vaccine. This vaccine is just one sort of microcosm of the overall issue, and the issue is, we have not gotten our act together as a people to be a black nation. We haven't taken this idea of unity that we like to throw around, because everybody talks about unity, right? It's always unity and black girl magic and everybody black win and blah, 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 blah. But most of the time, that's just masquerading for white supremacy and blackface, right? Honestly, it's just neo-colonial nonsense that we just put a blackface on. But to actually be black first, to actually divest and actually be unified under a Pan-African black liberation ideology, that provides power, right? Then when the government wants to do something like that, then they think twice. Then when they do it, then they know that there's going to be repercussions. Do you think that they're going into Hasidic communities and telling them this? The Hasidim has had lots of issues with the spread of COVID, right? Lots of not following protocols, not wearing, you know, at the height of the disease. Was any government agency rounding them up and forcing them, or were they getting taught? No, because those are a group of people who you can disagree with the politics of the day is long. They don't care, because they're a nation. They have nationhood power that we don't have. We have to start thinking like that. We have to start thinking in that tribal, nationalistic mentality and stop with all this, you know, USA. Like, who cares who's going to win the Olympics? That had nothing to do with us. That's not our nation.
Right.
You know, those are ambassadors for this. Those are ambassadors for this white nation. They just happen to be black people.
Yeah.
I wanted to, because we have Brother Tony Johnson here. He says that this whole COVID-19 Delta variant is blown way out of proportion. He also saying something very, very important here, family. I just wanted to point this out. Hold on, this comment that he's saying right here that I'm battling this variant, but I have no fear of how the media is using this as some billion-dollar tragedy, is what he's saying. So that's the brother Tony Johnson. Thank you, brother, for coming on. He's actually saying now, family, you know, that that he's battling it now, but he's still not in fear of it. That sort of thing. He says, I have no fear of how the media is using that. So
they diagnosed him with COVID on Monday, actually, but you know, he's dealing with it.
With you. I hope you have a speedy recovery, brother.
Important, and thank you for the family.
Me too.
You know,
and people are badgering him because people are badgering him, and one of his friends stopped communicating with him because
joining us within this discussion
because Tony doesn't want the vaccine.
That sort of a thing, right? Because he's saying here there will be many created media versions of COVID-19 when it's all said and done. I agree with that. Also, I also agree, you know, with what you're saying, brother Brother Eddie, I'm also agreeing what you're saying. It's that's what it is. It's them trying to turn, using the divide and conquer strategy to turn us against one another, by, pulling us, with, normalcy and safety. That's what they do. They pull you with stuff like normalcy and safety to get you to give away your freedoms to them. And as the brother Eddie was saying, that if we were more unified as a people, they wouldn't be able just to come in and just do us like that. They wouldn't be able
And
to even
also
come
we
in and
would,
do
yeah,
that.
right, and we would be able to respond, right? Because the reality of it is, they're not coming in to take away our freedoms. We don't have these freedoms. We abdicated those freedoms a long time ago. Most of us, when we in the assimilation into this society. The reality of it is, they're just showing us who's in charge now. This is the effect of power. This is the effect of the loss of right and liberty that we've already abdicated. And if we were in a more nation forward standpoint, then Brother Tony Johnson's stance and his lack of fear would not be unique to him. That would be the way that our people move, right? Because even for people who chose to get the vaccine, right? Because if we were a nation, there still might be people who decide they want to have this vaccine for lots of and various reasons. But right now, because we don't have that level of power and authority, we lack the authority to even talk about it without getting called crazy conspiracy theorists, right? We don't have expert status within this power paradigm. We can say whatever we want about Dr. Fauci or this one, that one, or whatever. It doesn't matter who they are, what kind of clown they are. They are imbued with the authority of the nation that stands behind them, as is the experts, behind any other tribal group or ethnic group that decides and makes these kinds of decisions, right? But we have to look at it that way. We have to stop looking at things like we want to react to this situation that's happening now. We have to look at it much more holistically, and we have to look at it with a nation mentality. Otherwise, we're just activists in the moment, reacting to whatever's hot right now, which is just going along with what we're being told and controlled by, right? Because they're controlling the narrative and the conversation. But when you have the authority and the power of nation status that comes with nationalistic unity, then people can play in your face all day long, but it's not going to be able to manipulate you and maneuver around you, because you have the protection of the group. I work in pharmaceutical advertising, so I understand things differently than my parents who don't, but we don't all have the experts, but we do have to be a part of an organization, a part of a nation, a part of a group that is going to have our common interest at heart and is going to speak in one voice for us. In order to do that, we have to be willing to buckle down and become a nation. I want to beat a dead horse.
Awesome.
So
That's great. That is great. Great comment. I just want to focus on what just real quick on what Tony Johnson is saying here. He's saying here there is a Lambda variant that's cropping up now. So we understand what the plan is just to continue to keep us leveled into fear by using the veneer of normalcy and safety. That's what they do to basically turn the vaccinated against the unvaccinated, and then keep us giving away our freedoms. Then the brother's saying here, hold on, I just wanted to, he's saying my aunt got vaccinated and still has COVID-19. That's another thing right there. But the media isn't talking about that, though they just are badgering those who isn't vaccinated. And that's what I'm saying. That's the plan. There are people who are fully vaccinated who are still getting COVID-19, and I think it's really truly being underreported by the media, because they don't want that particular thing out, because they still want to use you basically as the research. They want to use you basically as the research, and so that they can keep the billions of dollars funneling through Big Pharma. They want to keep the agency of Big Pharma, and they want to keep the money rolling in. That's what I feel a lot of this is about, and why the government now seems like that is slipping into a totalitarian type of state where they're passing mandates saying You can't go to the store. You can't do this. You can't do that without a vaccination card. They just did it in they just did it over in Europe, and they're doing it in New York right now as we speak. So yeah.
I mean, and none of that is unprecedented, right? Like those things the government has taken those kinds of extraordinary actions during other sorts of situations, other kinds of health scares. So I really want to stress that I personally think that it's a mistake for us to make it too much about this specific vaccine. There isn't anything special about this particular vaccine. This just happens to be what's happening right now. Tomorrow, if the bird flu or the swine flu or the bovine influenza had reached over here and not stayed in Europe and in China 10, 15, 20, whatever years ago that was, then we would have seen a version of this as well. We have the vulnerability, the susceptibility to these kinds of things, irrespective of what the current pandemic is, because of our vulnerable state. There's nothing special about this particular vaccine. The government didn't have to dig up a whole new bag of tricks and work some new special magic. This is common operating procedure. They know how to do this. And we have to start.
It's classic divide and conquer strategy. It's classic divide and conquer strategy. They want to divide us against ourselves, and they're only using this, like I said, they're covering it in under normalcy and safety. That's what it is. And so, of course, it's going to cause people to continue to give away their freedoms, that sort of a thing. And I completely agree with you, Brother Eddie, that it's because we haven't properly unified as a people to deter that type of stuff, to deter these type of attacks from happening to us. That's that sort of a thing. But Brother Tony Johnson is saying here, he's saying the non-vaccinated is the ultimate scapegoat for the imperfections of their created vaccinations. Very, very true. It's not so much about those vaccinations. It's so much about the bigger issue of us not having, as Brother Eddie just eloquently pointed out, us not having the unity that we need to have in order to deter these constant psyops attacks from the government that have been happening. And they're right out in the open and right out in the daylight, they're showing their hand.
Yeah, it's just another piece of the manipulation, control, and greed puzzle that we're stuck in. It's all about manipulation, greed, control, and of course, the main focuses of their control are our people. They want to keep that foot on our neck, so to speak. And I've been talking about separation now for the past decade, probably. The fact that we should have been coming together and unifying and creating our own system and our own government. And if we had done that when I first started saying it, we wouldn't be in this situation right now. This vaccine thing, as Brother Eddie said, is just another piece of that puzzle. It's nothing special about it.
Mm-hmm. And the response is not. Yeah, the response isn't even that complicated, right? Because the way that you combat a communication, a propaganda warfare, right, is you take the teeth out of it. Because right now we look at it as a situation where the unvaccinated are the people who are standing for their freedoms, liberty. You're not being persuaded, and the vaccinated people are just going along. But that's not actually an accurate way to frame it either. The reality of it is liberty and freedom means you can get the vaccine or you cannot get the vaccine. So if you communicate it differently, if our brothers and sisters who chose to get the vaccine because they feel that there is enough of a preponderance of evidence to make it worthwhile, right? Then if those people aren't the antithesis of the people who choose not to do that, then you've already eliminated a first point of conflict, right?
Right.
But we haven't done that. We've allowed ourselves to be part of the mechanism that shouts back and says you're wrong for getting the vaccine, and then in response we just say, well, you're just sheep and you're doing, So we participate in the communication warfare without even being asked to. we have to really think about how, as a community, we respond and react and interact when the government does these things, because the government's going to always move the chess pieces, but we ultimately have the ability to move or not be moved.
I agree. It's important how we communicate and how we feed into things. I must say, though, I've seen most of the negative comments and the bullying coming from people who are vaccinated.
People who are vaccinated.
I really don't see people who are not vaccinated bullying people who are vaccinated.
I definitely see the memes. If you do a Google search on the propaganda memes for anti-vaxxers, it's a whole rabbit hole you can go down. We don't we don't need to go back and forth on that point. My point just is, we have to be willing to be very elastic in how we think about these kinds of responses, and not necessarily the way that we have been routinely programmed to respond. Even in our responses that are, whoa, no, government wrong. Even the way that we disagree with the government, we should be willing to rethink and be elastic about the strategies that we use for even that. If we're really going to turn the corner on this or any other kind of a propaganda warfare issue.
Right.
Well, I'm just talking from the fact that I've seen a lot of bullying from the people who are vaccinated, and they'll go into name calling and calling people stupid and calling people selfish and just get the damn shot already. And I've been personally attacked by people who are vaccinated when they ask me if I'm vaccinated, and I'm honest and say that I'm not. They're like, well, why not? And get all up in my face about the shit and want to argue about it. I don't badger them about being vaccinated. I mean, if that's what you want to do.
Why? If you don't mind my asking, why do you disclose your vaccination status?
They ask me. I don't go around volunteering it.
But when they ask, like if they asked you if you had hepatitis, I don't know, would you disclose it? Like, would you disclose that to them?
Probably not.
Yeah.
But
when someone asks me about my vaccination status, my response to them is, I know you didn't just ask me that question. Because it's you have to remind people that it's a ridiculous thing to ask someone about their personal healthcare decisions. Like, there's literally a whole law about it. Like, there's a whole law.
But that's
you know what? With a lot of these people, if I respond to them with the way that you just said, they will start an argument. These people would just be arguing about it, and I don't feel like going back and forth with people about this thing.
But they're arguing with you even when you tell them. But even when you tell them this, then you said they're bullying you.
Well, not for long, because I walk away. But
yeah,
I don't have patience for that.
This what you guys are discussing. That's exactly, and I'm saying that y'all are against but this is what they want. They want a war, and in essence, a cultural war between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. It's a classic divide and conquer stratagem, and they have employed it against our people forever. Ever since they took over North America, they have employed that particular type of strategy against our people. We can all take it all the way back to Willie Lynch. That's what Willie Lynch is about. Willie Lynch is about divide and conquer strategy, and they've come in, they'll point out differences or create differences that was not there, so that we can fight amongst one another, give away our freedoms, give away our power, and they continue to rule without any type of interference. But the brother Tony Johnson is saying here, he said Florida and Arkansas is the hotbed of the unvaccinated, and it was in Arkansas where I contracted it. So that's what he's saying there. And then he's saying here, he's saying, do everything in your power to protect yourselves to protect yourselves and all of who you are. I think that's what he's saying there.
Yeah, of course.
Saying,
anyone who's
hold on, y'all. And then he's saying here, do everything in your powers to protect yourselves from this stuff, and you all are doing just that. So that's what he's saying. So yeah, and there are, as I think brother Eddie Miles was going into that. There are holistic ways that are not being pointed out that can actually protect you and keep your
Mhm.
because a lot of times what they do is what is called yellow journalism, which is
Right.
basically what they do is they report all of the so-called, deaths or anything, is happening from, this particular demic, but they're not reporting all of the people who have recovered from it. And I have people in
Mhm.
my family who I'm not going to name their names who went in and they recovered. One who was particularly diagnosed with it 2 times, and she came out and she recovered, and she never, she just used natural herbal remedies, and she never, they even offered it to her and then told her, that they was trying to study her and see how she was going to react to it, and she turned it down. She turned down the hocus pocus. She turned it down, and she's well and doing well today. And so it is a ploy against, this is my family here. It is a ploy against our people to do this mass research to see how particularly our, genetics are going to adhere or react, to this particular hocus pocus, and this medicine that they're putting out of here while they war against our minds any way. That sort of a thing. But the brother Tony Johnson, there's a link in the chat if you want to come up on here, brother, and share some of your you can join the conversation if you want. And shout out to all of the family that are out there, that are joining us. We got two, well, they're coming and they're going, just put it like that. But
Yeah, well, yeah, Tony, if you want to come on like real quick, because we don't want to spend much more time on this, because
right, if you
we've
want to
been
come
talking
on,
about it
brother
for a
Tony,
half
and share
hour.
your experience, click on the link. There's a link in the chat. It's on the King Talk Black page. Click on that link, and you can come on and you can join us here on the broadcast. That sort of thing. But he's also saying here, I'm doing aromatherapy with lemon peel and ginger steam, and it's helping me with my sense of smell. But I
Mhm.
wanted to talk to him and see if he actually took. I don't think he took the vaccine. I don't think he
No,
took the hocus
he's
pocus.
not
Well, no,
vaccinated.
Yeah, I don't think he took it.
He
So
hasn't.
okay, all right, cool.
Because
So
me and him talk on the phone sometimes, and he told
oh,
me when
okay.
yeah.
All right, good,
I mean,
good.
yeah.
So we understand that
Is you
there
gonna come
are
on?
holistic. I'm waiting for an answer for him, before we segue into something else. Brother Tony Johnson, if you want to come on, click the link in the chat. There's one up on the YouTube, where, and there's one in the King Talk Black page on Facebook. Click that link. It says say StreamYard on it, StreamYard.com, and you can join us on this podcast, but we're going to segue from that, and what else do you guys want to talk about? I got some, you know, I got I got some ideas, but I want to see where the conversation basically flows, and goes. I don't want to necessarily and I can throw something out there, but here, let me see something. Go
Well,
ahead.
you want to say something, Eddie?
No, go ahead.
Well, I'm ready to hear about
He
this
said
great old fish meal.
I don't
Actually,
want to.
but,
I don't want to dominate the conversation.
he's saying
oh, but
I
I'm
will
ready
listen
for the
to you
food.
guys here. He said I will listen to you
Okay.
guys here. So he's not going to come on. He's not.
Mm-hmm.
He said on to the next topic at hand is what he said now.
One thing I do want to bring up if we're segueing is just to remind everyone that we're in Black August. A lot of people are aware of February and Black History Month, but Black August, I guess for people who aren't familiar, you could associate it as being akin to this country's like Veterans Day. Like it's when we honor and do extra work and uplifting, highlighting, and working for our political prisoners. In particular, the ones who are still around that we can uplift and hopefully free. but also honoring, the fallen heroes and the past heroes as well. But it's a month of our revolutionary spirit, whereas Black History Month, as the name suggests, is sort of more rear facing. It's more historical and backwards facing. Black August, and especially with the focus on our political prisoners and the people who have literally given their lives,
Right.
and their liberty in our defense and in the service of Blackness. It's a very present and future facing sort of an ethos that goes along with what this month is about. And that's important because so often Blackness gets relegated it gets othered into this idea, into this culture, quote unquote, and these sort of nebulous things. And that's the reason why you can have a whole movement, for the police brutality and murder of Black men, and it's being led by white people who hate Black men. That's how those crazy things happen, is because we lose the tangible real world ideas that Blackness actually mean and are. And I think that this month in particular is a great chance for us to recenter and refocus on that, whether it be letter writing, whether it is reaching out to people in the the POW community, or our incarcerated warriors community that do that work. It's an important month. It's an important thing for people to look up if you aren't familiar. I'm trying to think of a website off the top of my head. I want to say that the Good Men Project might have some information on it, but you can do a search on it. But that's an important thing, I think, to bring up.
Yes, it's very important.
Right.
Thank you for bringing it up and educating people on that, because a lot of people don't know what Black August is. So thank you for that.
They sure don't. And then, of course, our brother Tony Johnson brings up that they're having a Freedom Fest here in my hometown of Selma. Selma, of course, being very, very important, as far as the history of our development, that town being very, very important. They're having a Freedom Fest here in my hometown of Selma today to commemorate Juneteenth, which was canceled back in June due to a tropical storm that took place here. So he's saying that they're doing a Juneteenth celebration. And a lot of people, of course, don't know about Juneteenth as well. I mean, they finally heard about it since the government went. That's something that we could talk. That since the government went in and basically gentrified it. If you ask me, they gentrified it to try to hollow it out, or shall we say, hollow out the meaning of it to our people, so that they can turn it almost in essence now into a commercial commodity. So what do you guys think about that?
I think the first question you have to ask is why was it so easy for them to do that, right? And I think that I think that at least part of the reason is that in modernity, in the more recent iterations of the Black community being aware of Juneteenth and celebrating it, we've gone about it in not necessarily the right way. Like Juneteenth is a pretty horrible thing, right? Like what it commemorates is actually a very, very horrible, like inhumane, disgusting. Just it's a blight on the consciousness of white America, where it should be. They have no shame. But in reality, if they were humans, that's how you would look at it. If my people had done that to someone and required a Juneteenth to be necessary, I would be in shame 400 years later, right? But we don't communicate it that way to each other, right? It's celebratory, and of course they celebrated back then. You would too, but right now we have the benefit of context, right? And I don't think that we necessarily do a good enough job all the time of weaving in the dire importance into these kinds of things. Because if Juneteenth was about celebrating our freedom and shaming white people, I don't think that they would be so quick to want to gentrify it. I don't think brands would be rushing to run Juneteenth they wouldn't be rushing to run Juneteenth circulars and sales if Juneteenth was about the shame and disgrace of white America being so inhumane after being inhumane for 400, If that's how we communicate, if that's how we message that holiday, I don't think that would be as easy to gentrify and co-opt. But it's easy to co-opt. It's easy to co-opt a party.
Right. What are your thoughts on that, Cote?
And I'm not saying that everyone that celebrates Juneteenth is looking at it as just a party, but I think that in general we probably could do a better job.
Well, I totally agree with what Brother Eddie was saying about how we look at it. If we did look at it in such a way of commemorating the what's the right word? the viciousness, the what's the word for them, for those people? The viciousness, the savagery of white folks. That's what I was looking for, the savagery of white folks. We were like commemorating it in that way. They would not want to make that a legal holiday. If we were talking about the truth of their history of how their people act and the way that they've acted, no matter where they go across the globe. These people, they've never gone anywhere and tried to get along with the native people or the indigenous people to different lands. Wherever they've gone there to take over, to steal, to rape, to pillage, and murder. So if we were looking at it in that way, they would not have made that a legal holiday. And unfortunately, a number of our people do look at it as a party, because this past June when they did that, everybody was just going around blindly saying "Happy Juneteenth, Happy Juneteenth."
Yeah, there's nothing. Yeah,
right. And people were putting, I don't mean to harm. People were putting like their little parties up on there on social media and and that sort of a thing. And like I said,
with these big grins on their face and shit, and just laughing about it. Have no right. It's just sad. And honestly, I didn't want it to be made a quote unquote legal holiday. Because I don't want white folks up in my face talking about Happy Juneteenth.
I mean, the white folks I know better.
Well, some of them don't know better here. They would try, and of course, they're going to capitalize off of it. They're going to start having their little. They already started their little Juneteenth sales.
Because Juneteenth I seen it. It was up there. People would. Come on. These Caucasians up here with candy cloth, talk about, Juneteenth. They were already doing it.
The Congressional Black Caucus allowed it.
It was a performance. It was a performance, and of course there was this Caucasian lady. She was performing, and they had their biggest day, Juneteenth performance. I'm like, they already did it. They already went and and did the gentrification on what Juneteenth is, basically by hollowing it out or co-opting it, as the brother Eddie Miles has said, or co-opting it, basically taking the energy and repurposing it for something that's going to ultimately benefit them, not us.
Right.
As far as the honoring and the revering of our history, as far as our Holocaust here as a people. But Brother Tony Johnson said, I went to see Greenwood in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it was an eye-opener for me. I would love for you to come on, Tony, and express how that was an eye-opener for you. And then also he's saying here that I'm just hating that they will now commercialize it. So he's talking about Juneteenth again, that sort of thing. And we thank the brother for his, being here with us and hanging out with us and actually offering, some good commentary as well, and adding to the richness of our conversation. So yeah, that's how me personally, myself, I've never celebrated Juneteenth. Because for me, and it wasn't because, I understood what the concept was about it once I heard about it and once I studied, once I did some research for myself. But I've always contended that we were never really truly, that right now we're still in essence enslaved. A lot of us mentally, we are enslaved as a people still. Still, so I never wanted to celebrate something that I just felt as though was just, what are you celebrating? We're not actually really truly free in
We're
my
not free. We're not
estimation of
free yet. We're
Yeah.
still in slavery.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to understand that it's not, Black Independence Day, and I don't think that. I mean, I have and do commemorate Juneteenth, similarly to how I commemorate other things on the Black national calendar, like Malcolm X's birthday, things like that. And some of those things are celebratory, and other of those things are more somber occasions. And it's important, in our household, that I live with my brother, and he has two children who are preteens. They're 12 and 10 years old, and those are the days that we make sure that, in addition to what we're doing every day, that we make a point to talk about what happened that made Juneteenth, why Juneteenth is important. It's more of a way that we more formally fill in the educational gaps from generationally. And pass those things down. So I think that a lot of the times, I don't have a problem with people who want to celebrate it, because I think that there's an important cultural component to that remembrance. And our ancestors did celebrate because they were happy to be as free as they'd ever been
And that
in their
does not
lifetimes.
include,
In their
and that
lifetimes.
does not include having a Becky up there in African attire dancing in the Juneteenth
Exactly.
celebration.
And I guarantee you,
Or some white man.
NASA was not celebrating with those brothers and sisters back then.
Right.
So the problem is, we have this culture of representation. We always want to be represented. We want a representation, seat at the table. That's some neo-colonial nonsense. Segregation is what we need. If we weren't so afraid to tell white people this ain't for you, then we wouldn't have as much of a problem. On Juneteenth, the first thing that I did, we have an office, basically like Facebook, but just for our employees, like our department kind of a thing. And, our job, like a lot of places, decided to recognize Juneteenth. I think last year they started, or it might have been the year before. And I just sent out my, annual email explaining that Juneteenth is a Black holiday. It isn't for white people. It's inappropriate. Just like it's inappropriate for you to wish me a happy Kwanzaa, it's inappropriate for you to say anything to me about Juneteenth, other than to let me have the day off when I request it and keep it moving. And I don't have a problem saying that to my boss and my coworkers, and they don't have a problem respecting me because they know where I stand on it. But we don't do that. We don't take that time to talk to our young people or our grown people if they don't know when those holidays come up, right? We don't do that part. So then when they're out in the world, of course they're afraid to say it, because they're worried that Connor's not going to pick them for the softball team and not going to get an, they're worried about that. That's what they're worried about, because we haven't armed them with enough generational, intellectual thought leadership to combat those things. And I think that that's something that we talk in these big terms about unity and nation building, and that can seem overwhelming and intimidating. But that's also nation building, and that's something that has always been done at the local level, person to person, family to family, people to people, forums like this, because now technology lets us have broader reach. But it's the same thing. It's the way that I know to do that, because my grandmother, my uncle, our family historians did. That's what they did for us. We have to hold those kinds of traditions as dear and as sacred. We have to hold them inviolate, so that we are confident when we're presented with those situations. When we see our stuff being swatterjacked, we can say, "Nah, I'm not writing a think piece about this. You violated. Flip out it." We're afraid to show. We're afraid to show what's up, right? We've lost the teeth that our ancestors would have not thought twice about. We've forgotten that we are a people for whom dignity has been taken and systematically stolen and robbed of. And so it should be our dignity is even more important than white people's dignity is to them. It matters more to me how I am treated and seen out in the world than it does my white boss. And I'm not afraid to make a bigger deal about it when it is appropriate around him, And I'm using myself as an example. It's nothing special about me. I mean, me, a Black man, me, a Black person. And we have to not start. We have to restart that modality, because we had it. I didn't make that up. This is no new thinking. I'm not giving you any new thinking. This is not new game. I didn't author any of this thinking. This is what our people have always done. But somewhere around somewhere down the line, we integrated and achieved our way out of remembering that we still at war.
We sure are. I can agree. I can completely agree there. The brother Tony Johnson said the real Independence Day for me is Black liberation, which is another great. And then he's saying here that MLK said he thought he led our people into a burning house when it comes to integration, and of course that reflects on what basically that elucidates what you were saying, brother Eddie Miles. He just what you were saying about the whole segregation, as opposed to integration piece, that we did when we were segregated. We were possessed of a certain consciousness, and we knew that all we really truly had was us, as far as this war that we are still in. And when we integrated, we slipped, we lost some of that. We haven't lost all of it, but a great deal of it we have lost.
That's exactly the reason why they allowed integration, to interrupt all the progress that our people were making together. They didn't allow integration because they wanted to be so-called fair. They only allowed it because they saw how well we were doing amongst ourselves, and they wanted to interrupt that.
I think that we have to be careful with that interpretation of segregation and integration. I think that is a romanticization of what segregation was like. In reality, if you look at the numbers of what was actually going on in the Black community, and again, this is one of the things that the lens of history, even our history is still selective, right? Because we talk about Black Wall Street, and we talk about Tulsa, and we talk about all the businesses that were in downtown Atlanta and how there's we talk about all those things, right? But we often forget to remember that actually represented the equivalent of the 1% of our community. Right. That wasn't the reality for most Black families, most Black men and women, most Black children. Segregation was an extension of the brutality of slavery. Right. It wasn't. So any achievement that we made definitely was a sense of pride, because we achieved in spite of all of these horrific circumstances. But the reality of it is we wanted integration because segregation was so hard on our people. So it's not like our leaders said, oh, let's just go be like white people, right? The reason why integration was a popular idea back then is because segregation was actually quite brutal on our people, and most of us were not succeeding. And I think that most of our leadership, even if you go back to Du Bois and Booker T. Washington with their battles, they had the foresight to see that we had to deal with the reality of this segregated society and the impact it would have for us. Booker T tried to carve out, this area of economics for our people, the trades and that sort of thing. And Du Bois was more of an integrated academic kind of a perspective on it. But both of them understood that segregation was going to be the next wave of brutality coming out of slavery. That white people weren't just going to let us out of slavery and not keep punishing us. So we have to remember, when we talk about how integration interrupted us, it did in many ways. White people aren't stupid, right? They used integration to undermine a lot of the things that would have been a source of pride, a lot of the things that maybe could have been progress. But the reality of it is, like we are looking at right now with the Jay-Z's and the Rihannas and the billionaire class right now, ultimately, eventually, that's where that goes. If we're following, the model of building replicas of white systems and not actually creating separate, divested Black systems, we're going to run into that same problem where there are the haves and the have-nots, right? So we have to be careful. We just need to be careful about romanticizing it too much.
I was not romanticizing it. I'm just saying that Black people, a lot of them gave up working in their own businesses to go work for white people. Like Dr. Claude Anderson talked about the whole thing with Wilmington, Chester, the black town where they had their own black owned bus companies and stuff like that. And instead of, sticking with that, they'd rather fight to sit next to or fight to be on a bus with white people than to have their own. We gave up a lot of our own stuff just to be next to white folks.
I think that though, but I think that even with that situation, I don't think that it's as simple as we did it to be next to white folks. We did it because, remember, it's like, when you go to a black-owned business, sometimes people say, "Oh, I want to support black, but the service isn't that good," and they take like this. There's a service difference than when I go to like a white establishment or a chain restaurant. Of course, there is, right? These people had years and So yes, it isn't just that they wanted to be next to white people. It was more difficult to maintain those black systems and services once we were able to fight, and there was a window to get into some of those other things. The cost benefit of maintaining our own, there was extraordinary cost to some, not all, to some of them. So it wasn't just as simple as our people wanted to be next to white people. It's also that in order to do the things that we had to do to maintain our systems against those kinds of odds, because remember, it's not like the government was doing the things for us that it was doing for those white establishments, right? So at some point, the ease of survival and use does kick into those kinds of decisions. So I don't want for us to frame that lens entirely that way. Although, to your point, certainly, and especially nowadays, we're actually suffering from it way more now, I think, than our ancestors.
Most definitely.
Now we have no excuse. There were mitigating circumstances back then. Even if they really thought that it would be better to be integrated with white people, you could forgive them because they didn't know. But we have all this research. They tried it, it didn't work. And we still out here trying to integrate with Tom and Becky.
Well,
let me put it like this. Let me get this in like real quick. It was basically what he's talking about. I feel was what they call separate but equal. How that goes? Separate but not equal. Separate but not equal is what we were suffering from when we were in essence segregated. So it's a sacrifice. It's a sacrifice. When we integrated, there was a certain type of communal consciousness that we had as a people when we integrated, and that was the sacrifice for that separate but not equal type of conundrum that we were going through as a people at that time.
Right.
When we integrated, we lost that communal consciousness, but we gained as far as certain societal benefits that we were able to gain up and through the system. That's why I've always said, try to do what you can do in the system, but do not be of the system. There is a way that you can operate under the veneer of the system, but not necessarily be of it to empower it against your own liberation. But because we understand we cannot continue to do capitalism.
Well, most black people don't do that.
Hierarchy and the stratification of capitalism. We have to bring it back to where we were as a people, as far as more on a communal basis, for a universal type, a universality type of consciousness, that we enjoyed heretofore before we integrated. We need to take it back to that, and then have our economics reflect that. So that's what I wanted to say. But hold on for 1 second, Coach. I know you want to get in. I just want to point out what Brother Tony Johnson is saying. He's saying, then those whites that had the audacity to tell black people to get over slavery, he said, get the hell up out of here. Watch how their tune would quickly change if we tell them to get over the benefits of what slavery has done for their trash ass ancestors. That's what he put down there. And then the brother is saying here that did you all know that Malcolm X went to talk with the leader of the KKK about having property to integrate from the white community? I knew that, and I know you knew that too.
Yeah, I knew that.
Cortez, but go ahead and say what you was going to say, Cortez, because I don't want to. You saying you was going to say something?
No, well, now what Tony talked about, if we were to say to them, you know, to get over how, you know, their people are benefiting from what their trash ass ancestors did to us. Now you got black people saying that kind of stuff. Like I told you on the quote unquote 4th of July when I was out and about, this black man said to me, "Happy Independence Day," and I said, "That's not an Independence Day for us at all, because our people were still enslaved and so forth during that time and being beaten and raped and torn away from their families." And he said, "You need to get over that." This from a black man who I believe is like in his 60s. He said, "You need to get over that." This is that same black man who, when I went to I told you about it. I was in a bar, and
I remember we talked about it.
Yeah, I was sitting on one side of the room. He was on the opposite side of the bar, and like 5 white people came in, and they came on the side of the room where I was, and there was like 2 or 3 stools empty next to me to the right of me, and on the other side of me there was like 1 stool empty. So when these like 3 white women and 2 white men or whatever it was came in the bar, this Negro jumped up out of his seat, ran across the room with a stool to make sure that Miss Ann had a seat. And then he had the nerve to say to me, "Why don't you move down some to give them room?" Because they were all bunched up on each other. And I said, "I'm not moving anywhere. I don't just jump up out of my seat just because white people walk in the damn room." Okay, he's gonna tell me I should move over because they were all bunched up on each other. I'm like, if they open their mouths and use some manners and say, "Excuse me, sir, would you mind sliding down?" I might do that. But I'm not just gonna automatically just jump up out of my seat just because white people enter the fucking room. I don't do that. And this Negro, like I said, this is a man that's like, I believe he's either in his late 50s or he's in his 60s, telling me this. So we don't have to just deal with white folks saying get over it anymore. You got black folks doing that shit for them, saying get over what our ancestors went through. Just go along to get along. Like me being in the arts, I got to deal all the time with some black artists who are just trying to get a seat at the white man's table, talking about, "I want to get my Oscar in 5 years. I'm going to get an Oscar in 5 years." That's all they're concerned about, is getting an Oscar, and they don't care about what they got to do to get it. They'll play any type of role to get it. Doesn't matter how demeaning it is. But because I'm somebody who's very, very outspoken about being black first and what I do and what I write, because I don't write for white people. I write for black people. I write to empower and inspire black people and to heal black people. That's how I write. Because of that, I get, ostracized by other black folks because of what I do, and it's just very frustrating. And that's what happened to us after living under the system for so long. We become very disconnected from each other, even with things like with Martin Luther King, for instance. Some black folks only celebrate certain parts of Martin Luther King, if you know what I mean. They will only celebrate the part of Martin Luther King that keeps this system comfortable. But they don't want to talk about the Martin Luther King that talked about reparations, the Martin Luther King who talked about being proud of your blackness and not letting anybody take that away from you, the Martin Luther King who in his last speech was saying how frustrated he was, and he basically was telling black people to take their money out of the white banks and put their money into black-owned bank. Whenever I talk about that,
yeah, who talked about poverty and income inequality, and he was,
they just
Martin Luther King wouldn't have celebrated billionaires.
Yeah, they just want to focus on that one little piece of that "I Have a Dream" speech, which that whole speech is actually 18 minutes long. But they only want to focus on that one little section. I have a dream that one day little black boys and little black girls would join hands with little white boys and little white girls, and they hammer that into our minds. So nowadays a lot of black people think that's all Martin Luther King was about us just coming together and joining hands with white folks, but that's not what he was about. They don't want to talk about the Martin Luther King that was trying to empower black people and get reparations for black people. There's been so many films done. There's been so many films done about Martin Luther King. But none of those films about him ever show that side of him. They only show the side that keeps this system comfortable. And Black people feed into that shit. Because that's all we want to hear. You know?
Right. Because like I said, when we integrated, there was a certain type of communal consciousness that we had. We had it, I'm gonna tell you right now, we had it right up to, because I remember, did you go, I know you went to see the movie at BMX, The Summer of Soul.
Which movie?
Right?
Yeah. I saw it. Yeah, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, yeah.
That movie right there, that y'all can go and watch on anybody who hasn't seen it, go and watch it on Hulu. It's on Hulu. Back then, even during that particular time, the 60s and the 70s, I think it kind of died right when hip hop started to become popular, like right around in the mid 90s, when it just kind of really died with our people. We had a communal type of consciousness as a people, but it was really, really in the 60s and the 70s. There was a communal consciousness that we had that, as we integrated, slowly started to deteriorate amongst our people to where we are right now today. Where we're stratified along the lines of class economics, basically. That's why they putting out, Rihanna is, a Billy now, because, Janet used to be a Billy, because Dr. Dre used to be a Billy, because, whoever is a Billy. But what does that mean to you? What does that mean to me and you? What are they going to do with their billions now that they got them? Are they going to do anything for, the overall liberation of our people? Or is it just,
no?
If it's just something to celebrate that's empty, this one is a billion, who cares? What are you going to do with all of those billions now that you got them? And why is it that our entertainers are more empowered and more enriched over our leaders, over our leader that just went out of here, Renuko Rashidi? Why are they the most popular ones, in our community as a people? Why do they get the most attention? Why do they get the most power? And this is an excellent segue into another controversy that did happen when a certain, performer, I'm going to say performer, made some incendiary comments around, I'm going to say black sexuality. I'm going to put it like that. So, if you guys want to weigh it into that, we can, but I'm saying that was an excellent segue into, it seems like there's a lot of celebrity worship going on with us as a people, where it's like our celebrities have this almost immense power, but a lot of our celebrities don't, their heart and their mind is not in the right place when it comes to us as a people. It's not. So what do you guys think about that?
I'm not sure I know what I don't know what that is.
I'm talking about, I don't want to say his name. I really don't want to say his name. It was a rapper, Eddie Miles. It was a rapper. And he made some incendiary comments around black sexuality. I don't want
to. Okay. Yeah, I know you don't. Okay. I mean, I know the story. I couldn't tell you one song that person sings. That's not my generation.
I don't really
listen.
know.
I don't think. I think that things like that. I think there's a couple of ways that we should look at those kinds of things. I think that one of them is in practical terms, right? And in practical terms, people who are agents of the system, who operate and their livelihood is bestowed by the system that oppresses us, as all of those entertainers are, there is nothing that they have to say that should be material to us, good, bad, or indifferent. Every now and again, they're going to say something cogent that makes sense. Most of the time, they're going to say something that's wild and inflammatory. Usually, they're doing it because they are either idiots or because they understand how to play the game of controversy and they understand how to get their name trending. Who knows what the reason is? You can guess, but you can never know. But in either situation, from a practical standpoint, there is nothing that they have to say that should be material to any of us who are adults. Of course, the reality is they have a following, and our young people do follow those sorts of things. So I think that it's important for us to be able to counter things that are, blatantly, negative and not consistent with the politics of universal blackness that includes everyone, including people who are imperfect and who have said stupid, even have said stupid things. I think we have to do that on our own. But I think that philosophically, you have to look at the things that he said and the ways that he was responded to and reacted to in deference to what other people have said who are maybe not black men, or who are maybe not as like there's always another layer that you can peel that onion back and you can rationalize it away. So to me, if there's too many but ifs about the topic, it's probably a topic too frivolous to give too much consideration, because in a news cycle he will be gone. We used to care about what that dude Louis C. whatever, who was jerking off in front of women in his comedy sets. That used to be like the biggest, craziest thing we had heard that week. And we don't talk about, what I'm saying? Like, we are in control of the media and the messaging, and these people aren't actually our people. He doesn't belong to us. He's making his living on what can broadly be called black music, because that's the origin, that's the genesis of it. But these stars have long since given that away, and they don't deserve our consideration with any deep specificity.
Okay, what do you feel about that, Brother Gonzalez? I know you got something to say.
Honestly, I didn't really care what he said. I didn't, and I don't know his music either. And it's like, first of all, the things that he said about HIV and all that stuff, I've honestly heard from some homosexuals. Okay.
Right.
He hasn't said anything that some homosexuals have not said out of their mouth when they're being very vicious and nasty. And let me just say, the LGBTQ community, a lot of gay identified black folks can be very vicious and catty towards one another when they want to be, and they will criticize everybody else. But as soon as someone says something against that or them, they want to go on the attack. They want to whine and cry and just want everybody to be erased. But when it's a black person, that is. When a black person says something against them, they want that person gone. But I have witnessed Caucasians say stuff against homosexuals, and nobody tries to erase them off the planet. Okay?
Erase them. They too busy sleeping with them.
That too. I mean, like Eminem, right?
To bear with us. Go ahead, Cortez.
Yeah, like with Eminem, for instance. Eminem has had both racist and homophobic lyrics, right? But you have black folks still to this day who will rep for Eminem and even try to call him the best rapper on the planet, which is a bunch of bullshit. I'm so tired of black folk giving this person so much props, like he's all this and that, and the fact that when you bring up the fact that he's had racist lyrics and he's had homophobic lyrics and lyrics that were downright degrading towards black women, you have Negroes who would say, "Oh well, people change." We always giving white folks the benefit of the doubt, talking about they can change or that why are they acting like that? Why do they say that? Even with a fucking Klan member, you have black folks who are willing to sit down and talk to a Klan member and ask, why are you like that, right? But when a black person says something that may offend them, like with that guy, a grown man, well, first of all, a grown man who names himself the baby, that should tell you something right there, that he has some issues. But I'm not going to get into that. But we don't look at cause and effect.
Yeah, exactly.
we don't look at cause and effect when, like, him saying that out of
his great grandfather didn't want to be called boy, but he out here calling himself the baby.
Right. And who randomly comes out of their mouth at their concerts and start talking about hold your lighters up if you're not sucking dick in the parking lot? And where did that come from? It didn't just come out of the air.
Right.
Okay. There was a reason behind why he said it. And it's not automatically that he so-called hates homosexuals either, because he talked about the fact that he had homosexual fans. And he may have heard that talk from them, I'm sure, but we also don't know if there's some trauma behind what he said as well. Like what we talked about earlier with Dr. Cleo Monago, the whole incident where a few years ago when he was in Atlanta, there was this brother who said out loud in the airport or whatever, I hate faggots, right? Now, a lot of homosexual people would have just flew off the handle automatically because he said that. But that's not how Dr. Cleo Monago handled it. Dr. Cleo Monago calmly said to him, well, why do you feel that way, brother? And the brother talked to him and told him, that he had been raped as a little boy, right? He had been raped as a little boy by a man. So in this man's mind, he equates that rape with homosexuals, right? So it's not that he was just being hateful. It's because he equates homosexuality with that trauma that he experienced. So when people say stuff like, huh?
I mean, yeah, but I think that's a slippery slope. At the end of the day, I think that adults are both responsible for their trauma and also the work of healing from it, and that there have to be acceptable and unacceptable ways to comport oneself in the public space. That said, the inconsistency with who gets consideration and who gets compassion is the only thing that I think matters to me. At the end of the day, they're all all those people are garbage. If you have a publicist, you're probably trash. So at the end of the day, that's where I net out on that. I think that if we overanalyze the what have yous and the whys behind every person's nonsense, then very easily you're making excuses for the Klan member whose only experience was with a black person that beat his mother. It's like a slippery slope. At the end of the day, who cares? What's right. You know what's right. You know what's wrong. The baby, that guy is a grown man with a whole $1 million career, fans, publicists, social engineer, all of these things. He knew what he was saying. He knows he knows what it is. It was either lazy and or convenient. Either way, it is part of the manipulation of celebrity. And the best response, as far as I am concerned, as someone who works in advertising and marketing communications, the best response is to not give it audience, because that's the way that it goes away. And you got to be careful what hills you die on, because you die on that hill today, and then the public, people were mad at Eminem for half a second, right? But then Elton John went to the MTV Music Awards and held his hand. So it's like you gotta pick those battles when it comes to celebrity, because it's never ethics that reigns supreme for them.
Well, my thing is that Black folks are so willing to erase each other over misperceptions and so forth like that. Like, I get misperceived by the things that I say, being a Black first person, and I get accused all the time of hating white people. Okay, and when I say that I don't hate white people, a black person will come back and say, yes, you do. And when I say to them, it takes energy to hate, and I'm not wasting my energy on them. My energy is focused on loving Black people and bringing us together as a people. And because people's misperceptions of me and things that I say, and they want to misconstrue what I say out of my mouth, and they don't want to take the time to get to know me and see where I'm coming from, that's why I said what I said.
I can definitely appreciate that. I mean, someone thinks that I hate white people. I don't consider that an insult. I don't try to convince them that I don't have a problem with that. But no, I hear you.
I feel that it's when you're talking about, it's particularly when you're talking about like black sexuality, which is quite diverse.
Mm-hmm.
And quite powerful. I feel we really truly do wield a powerful sexuality on a lot of levels as a people. You you it what it does is it gets in the way of a healthy conversation that we can have that we can have about our sexuality, that will, overall create understanding and create awareness and create consciousness amongst us as a people rather than us attacking one another, division, that sort of a thing. But to my original, and why, in essence, why I segued into this, I feel that a people where it's like if their celebrities have more power than their actual leaders, their actual people, who, our leaders and our liberators, that sort of a thing, we're at a detriment. If you ask me, we're at a detriment, individually and collectively as a people, if our entertainers wield all of this immense power to disrupt, the healthy conversations that we can have around who
Mm-hmm.
we are and how we love as a people. That sort of a thing. I feel that's what I feel. I feel that it just that it unnecessarily gets in the way of the conversations that we definitely really truly could be had, healthy conversations and open conversations and adult conversations around our sexuality as a people. And so I don't it's like I said, it's to me it's just a detriment. It's a detriment. So
It's kind of
it is
hard to
what it is.
have it's kind of hard to have adult conversations with a lot of adults nowadays because they're still stuck in their childhood traumas and they
True,
speak from their childhood traumas
true.
that they
We
never got
lost
through.
brother Eddie, but I'm adding back right now. Yeah, it's yeah, that's and then the trauma.
Mhm.
Like
Well, I think now is a good time
I
to go into the.
feel
Is he
if
here?
you
I'm
huh?
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just we're having technical difficulties, because it just keeps this the reception here, for some reason the reception just keeps, going in and out, that sort of a thing, and I don't know whose end it is. It might be on my end or anybody's end, but that's just what's going on. But we'll just continue on with the conversation.
Okay. Well,
So
now I think is a good time because we're like right at like 3:23
yeah,
now to segue into the cooking.
right,
Um, Eddie Miles Jr., who was a chef. He's like I also said earlier, he's an advertising and marketing professional, a writer. Um, but now he's going to showcase his cooking skills, and he cooks from a Pan-African perspective. So before you go into preparing your meal and showing us the different ways to prepare it,
Hmm.
tell us what do you mean by cooking from a Pan-African perspective, or what makes it from a Pan-African perspective?
Well, first, I'm a home cook. I'm not a chef. I don't have any
Mm-hmm.
particular training. Yeah, I'm just
Mm-hmm.
a home cook. And
Still a
I like to
chef.
do it.
Go
I
ahead.
like to do it. But when I have a YouTube channel that's called the Pan African Family Cooking Show. I started it last
Mm-hmm.
summer because I I have done some work in food insecurity, like in donating time and working with nonprofits and charities in and around New York on things like food insecurity and shelter insecurity, and understanding the way that the environment, when we talk about things like the environmental sciences and the whole green movement and all these sorts of things, how much a part food plays into that. Because one of our biggest and most important economic expenditures, for some of us even above and beyond shelter, is food. It's where we spend, it consumes a lot of our attention, a lot of our resources, and a lot of our time. And it has a direct impact on how well we will or will not thrive as individuals, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we our sort of benign neglect has been the way that Americans have dealt with their diet since the advent of, you know, big packaged and processed food manufacturing, the move away from agriculturally centered, you know, economics to manufactured food consumption has created this idea where, you know, we as people don't really get that close to what we're eating. We don't understand our food. We don't make connections with where it comes from, with how it tastes, and all of those sorts of things, even though we're putting it in our bodies. And I think that when I look at the diaspora, when I look at people on the continent, when I look at people in the Caribbean, when I look at people who are in South America and Central America, the biggest cultural export, bar none, is food. Right, that's the single biggest cultural export that people have, and especially Black people throughout the diaspora. And one of the things that I noticed just in looking more into it is that everywhere else but here is intimately connected to where their food comes from and why they're cooking it, and the reason, the rationale behind it. And almost everywhere but here spends less money on food than we do. Spends less money on food than we do. So I thought that maybe there was some connection there. So the Pan-African aspect of it for me is less about any particular recipe. In fact, what I'm going to make today, what I'm going to show you how to make today, is actually going to have some sort of Asian inspired flavors to it. But what is Pan-African is the idea about thinking about the quality of the food that we're eating, the costs of the food that we're spending, and the amount of time that we devote to and allow food to consume. Because there is a direct relationship with how healthy a person is willing to be and how much time and effort they have to spend doing it. Because not everyone is like me who enjoys cooking. Like I like to cook, but even liking to cook, there are some days where I don't feel like doing it. So the economy is both in cost and also time. So trying to create recipes and techniques that our people who aren't as food savvy can use to sort of demystify healthy eating, which has been, you know, a very, very sort of white-centric thing. Like, we think about farm to table and eco, you know, you think of these white guys with like beards that live in Brooklyn and hipster doofus places like that. But the reality is, it's our people that pioneered that. It is Aboriginal and Indigenous people who did that. White people had to relearn that because they moved away from it. So we have to reclaim that idea for ourselves, and then just understand how to work within the paradigm that we have now. Understanding that a lot of our people can't afford to have vegan meal service deliveries to their houses. They can't afford to shop at Whole Foods for sustainably fished fish from, you know, that's not realistic. So what else can we do, and how do we circumnavigate the obstacles and still arrive at a healthy and tasty dish, and also something that feels elevated and fancy if you wanted to, you know, like you can have all of those elements that make food exciting. So that's the perspective that I cook from. What I want to do today, and we are at 3:30, so this whole meal should take no more than 20 minutes for me to make. I have this rule about not cooking anything that takes longer than 30, and most of the time it's 20 minutes. I don't personally eat red meat, and I try to stay away from chicken unless like my grandmother or mom or someone fries it. So I mostly eat fish. I eat seafood. And that's probably my first tip, is that if you're eating things like vegetables and seafood, you're going to have significantly lower prep and production time in your food. You're going to get dinner on the table faster and easier than with almost any other kind of protein.
I like that.
The cooking time for seafood across the board is at least half, sometimes more, less than it is to cook steak or pork or chicken.
Right. Well, I got my pen and my pad out, brother. So.
All right.
And what I'll do,
I'm copying everything down.
I'm ready to write.
What I'll do is I'll after this is over, I'll type this out and I'll send it to you, Cortez, and then you can upload the recipe to when you post the replay of the video or something. I'll type it out.
Right.
Cool.
Okay. So what we're going to do, and hopefully you'll be able to see because I'm using this iPad and not my phone. I mean, not my computer. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get you to see what I'm doing here. Okay. You tell me if you can see what I've got here.
I can see it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So what we've got, and my hands are clean. We've got two pieces of codfish. So cod is the kind of fish. If you think about fish and chips, in London where they're famous for it, it's a flaky white fish. It's pretty dense, and what that means is it can be flavored a lot of different ways. So if you're looking for a fish that is a little bit different than like just whiting or tilapia, things that you normally get. Cod is a good fish to get if you want to do something that's a little bit different. Are you not hearing?
It tastes excellent. It tastes excellent in a sandwich.
Oh, yeah,
most definitely. I love
exactly.
I definitely love it in the sandwich. I forget which place I went to. It might have been one of those burger places. No, it was Red Robin.
Okay.
And I got that cod. It was a codfish sandwich that I got there, and it was excellent. It was excellent.
It's an
excellent.
Yeah,
because those in the hood and carry out.
Because it's heavier, it holds up to bread, and you can put fixings on just like a burger. So if you're trying to eat less meat, right, then substituting the kind of fish that could substitute for a burger patty is a good way to transition. Right, it's hard to go cold turkey, but if you eat one meal less hamburgers than you normally eat in a week or in a month, you replace one or two of those with a piece of codfish, now you're on your way. And that's easier to do than to say I'm giving up meat.
Right. That's exactly why I brought it up, because I've always been transitioning from beef. So cod was an excellent, as you pointed out, brother Eddie Miles, it was an excellent transition or segue from that, because it tastes so great in a sandwich.
Exactly. So what we're going to do here is we're going to pan fry this. We're not going to bread it. We're just going to pan sear it on the stovetop, and we're going to give it a little bit of Asian seasoning. So I've taken this piece of cod out. It's been sitting on the countertop for about 30-40 minutes, so it can come up to room temperature. If you cook your protein, your fish, at room temperature, it is going to cook more evenly, and you're going to not have, it'll be harder to make it overcook and be dry if you start from a room temperature piece of fish. However, fish is one protein that if you happen to have forgotten to take it out of the freezer and you get home from work and you want to eat, you can cook fish frozen right in the pan, as long as you put a top on top of the pan. It'll be, you might have a little bit uneven cooking, but fish is an extremely forgiving protein from that perspective. So from a convenience standpoint, it works really well. So what we're gonna do is we're going to season this piece of cod with a couple of things. We're going to use all powdered herbs. If you watch the Food Network, you'll see them, talking about how fresh herbs are better, right? It's better to have fresh parsley and fresh basil and fresh this and fresh that. It's best to have fresh herbs when you have the time and the money to be making a very, very special meal, right? But in reality, for most people, it's hard to keep fresh herbs in your refrigerator and have them not spoil in the time that you're going to use them. So I personally only keep one or two fresh herbs. I tend to keep rosemary and parsley fresh in my refrigerator, and then anything else I just buy as I want to make it. But I keep a full complement of dried herbs because they last much longer and they don't spoil. And you have to use a little bit more of them because they aren't as flavorful as the fresh version. But there's no health difference. There's no other difference in them other than the reduction in flavor. And the convenience is certainly much more useful. So what we're going to do,
rosemary and what else?
No, that's not what's in here. Those are the two herbs I keep in my refrigerator are rosemary and parsley. But I'm going to go over what these herbs are that we're going to put.
Okay, all right.
So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to salt the fish. I always, when I'm teaching my nephew and my niece to cook, I always tell them to start with a palm full of salt and start high and just sprinkle it down. And you want to season it pretty well. You want to get a decent amount of salt on there because you want it to have flavor. And the thing that the salt is going to do is it's going to draw moisture out of the fish. You want your fish to be relatively dry. You don't want it to be too wet. If the fish is too wet, it will come out more tough because there'll be so much steam in the pan, it'll be a little bit tough. So I patted this dry, and I'm going to salt it pretty well on one side so that the moisture can be pulled out of it when it starts to cook. And then I'm going to add some garlic powder. I'm just doing a sprinkling just to coat the top of it. I'm going to use, in this case, it's paprika, but I use smoked paprika. I almost never use regular paprika. I always use either a smoked or a hot paprika. It is just crushed red peppers that gives a little bit of color, and the smoked version gives a little bit of depth of flavor.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to hit it with that. And then lastly, I'm going to add some ginger powder. Because we're taking this in a slightly Asian direction.
Mm-hmm.
You'll notice that a lot of the flavors that we associate with Asian cooking are equally as prevalent in Caribbean cooking. There is a lot of crossover in Asian spices and Caribbean spices. Typically, the amount and the variety is what differs. Whereas Asian people will use things like a shishito pepper, and Caribbeans will use a Scotch bonnet pepper. We'll use a yellow curry, and they'll use a green curry. So there's a lot of crossover, but like slightly different variances on those same sorts of things.
Okay.
Now that I've got those simple seasonings on the fish, I'm going to go ahead and get my pan ready. So you're going to walk over here with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll show you where I'm set up here. Hopefully you can see. I apologize. I wasn't planning to use this.
It's fine.
It's all good.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get the fire going on my pan. I don't want to have this pan preheated too early when I'm doing this. I'm going to put a little bit of oil in the pan, and I want it to go in there with a cold pan. If I put olive oil in the pan when it's already heated up, it'll scorch, and then that'll cause the fish to scald and to cook a little bit too unevenly. So I want everything to come up to temperature all at the same time.
Right.
And because this fish has no skin on it, I don't need to sear anything. If this was a piece of salmon, then I would want the pan to be hot because I want that skin to sizzle right when I put it in there so that it's crispy when it comes out. But this is a skinned fish, so we don't have that problem.
Right.
Okay.
And you were right about not putting the olive oil in there prematurely because it will. Because I cook with olive oil myself, it will do that. It will scorch and it will pop and that sort of a thing. So yeah,
right.
Got to be careful.
So I'm going to go ahead and get my fish in the pan. And investing in a good piece of cookware is important. I'm using a nonstick coated pan. It's a ceramic pan. I'm also going to use a cast iron skillet. They're heavier on the bottom. They conduct heat more evenly, and they will last you forever. One of these pans that I'm using is actually my late uncle's pan that he had since I was a little kid. And when he passed on, I inherited it, and I'm still using it. It's just fine.
Oh, wow.
Awesome. All for family heirlooms.
Exactly. So I went ahead and I put that in seasoned side down. Now I'm going to go ahead and repeat the seasoning mix on the other side in the pan. And I'm doing this for two reasons. One, because I want to coat the other side, but also because some of the seasoning is going to spill out into the pan. And that's going to be important because I'm going to cook something else in the same pan, and I want those flavors to be distributed in the pan. So you don't have to be neat. It's good for it to get all over the place. Now, now that we've come up to temperature, I want to reduce the heat from a high to a relatively low, medium heat. And I'm going to finish seasoning the rest of the fish. with all of the same seasonings that I put in the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And then
I can smell it from here.
I was going to say, if you were
Me
here,
too.
if I had smell-o-vision, that ginger and that garlic are already starting to open up and toast, and it smells really, really good.
Just from
Mm.
the seasonings you use, I can almost pretty much
Yeah.
deduce how it smells right now.
And we're gonna let that cook on a relatively low flame for a few minutes, and then we'll flip it over.
Right.
While we're waiting on that, we're gonna make the other component to this.
Okay.
Now, I said that I was gonna make you some options that could be done in a vegetarian manner. So what I've got here is something called textured protein. It's basically like ground up peas and other vegetable proteins that have been ground up, a little bit of coconut flake, dried out, and turned into like a crushed, not quite a flour, sort of like if you think about the consistency of coconut flakes, that's what it's like. The reason that's important is I've soaked it in just a little bit of water so that it's moist now, because it allows you to have a binder. We're going to make a little bit of a fried cake, kind of like a crab cake, just without crab. And it allows it to be bound together without using eggs and butter and cream.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a vegan product. So if you are vegan or vegetarian, or if you're having a party and you're people that don't eat meat, it's a good product to have on hand. One thing I want to point out about that product is that it's a processed product, right? A lot of times you hear that eating processed food is unhealthy. Yes and no. Almost every food is processing. When you chop an onion, that's processing it. It's really about the type of processing. It's about what kinds of foods you're using, what the source is, and how it's being delivered to you. If it's a refined product, then that's a processing that's not going to be very good because everything's been stripped out of it. Or is it just a product that's been taken from its original format and ground, chopped, and turned into something else? Well, this is no different than flour. Flour is processed, so is bread. So it's important to not get too hung up on like these buzzwords that you hear, in the news, because they change every other day. It's important to understand that all food is good for you and all food is bad for you. You have to understand where it's coming from and what you're doing with it and why you're eating it.
Right.
So
could you repeat just one more time? Eddie, could you repeat like what that mixture is? Like what's it made of?
Oh, I will read you the ingredients. It is pea protein, cornstarch, psyllium husk, and organic cornmeal with a little lemon powder and a touch of salt.
Okay, awesome.
So psyllium husk is basically the outside of corn. It's the undigestible part of corn. What gives it the bulk in the body. So it's extremely high in fiber, which is really, really good for you. In particular, if you are battling cholesterol and blood pressure issues. Increasing your fiber and your potassium are very, very helpful. So I'm going to augment this. I'm going to put this into my food processor. And I'm going to augment it with some broccoli. Just a couple of heads of broccoli that I've chopped up, so it's in a good size of the food processor, and then cauliflower. Now, this is a good trick that I use because I don't actually like cauliflower. So when I'm doing something like this, where it's going to be a component of an overall thing, I'm transforming it into something different. That's when I used to sneak in vegetables that I don't actually like. I also don't like broccoli, but it's good for you. And broccoli is generally pretty cheap, so we give it to the kids a lot. So we tend to have it. And in the spirit of not being wasteful, I like to eat it, but I just don't like it. So I usually use it in something else.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I'm going to take that, and I'm going to add a little bit of basil. This is in this case, it's Thai basil, which is a more pungent version of basil, and like the Italian version that we're used to. Yeah. So again, because we're going in an Asian direction, we're going to add some basil. And I'm going to add a little bit of spicy vegan mayo. So mayonnaise is a bad rap. Mayonnaise is generally made out of egg yolks and oil, but it's just an emulsified fat. So vegan mayonnaise is, generally speaking, just or olive oil or sapphire oil or palm oil, another oil that's just been whipped up really fast. If you can think about whipped cream, and you add some salt and you add a little bit of a fortifier, like a cream of tartar, and you can get a mayonnaise-like consistency and have a vegan product with no dairy, without any of the bad saturated fats and triglycerides. So I'm using just a little bit of spicy mayo so that it has some flavor, because I like spice. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of a riff on a seafood cake. So I have taken a little bit of a seafood medley. I'm going to use mussels, and I'm going to use a little bit of squid. Now, that sounds fancy, right? But actually,
mussels and squid.
Awesome. However, the way that I'm using it is part of a seafood medley from the frozen section of the supermarket. So I can get a whole bag of it for $6 or $7. Whereas if I had bought this fresh, it would be like $24 a pound. And the good thing about buying frozen seafood is that you're much more likely to have a wild caught variety. You always want to have wild seafood, not farm seafood. I'm going to come over here now, and I'm going to turn my fish. All that steam came off, and I just got a nice waft of that ginger. It smells delicious. I'm going to flip that over. And in fact, let me show you. Let me show you how good this looks already.
Definitely.
Can you see that?
Wow, that's really pretty.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So this fish is essentially cooked. So right now the fish is just waiting on me. So I have turned the light all the way down to the lowest possible simmer. And I'm going to leave the top on, but like tilted, not all the way on. I'm going to tilt it because I don't want the fish to dry out. It's basically just going to stay warm for me while I finish the rest of the meal. So just that fast, the protein's done.
Right. It didn't take long at all.
Not long at all. So I'm going to go ahead and buzz the food processor. And as kitchen, I'm a gadget geek. I love to have like kitchen appliances. Like I've got a gadget for almost everything. But if you're going to invest in just a couple of things, a food processor is definitely a good way to spend, $85, $100. You can get them at Walmart, and you can do so many different things with them. I have a video on my YouTube channel where I show you how to make a vegan ice cream in your food processor. It's a very, very versatile kitchen appliance. So I'm just going to go ahead and pulse it. Great. And now what we've got is a fairly wet consistency. And I want it to be a little bit drier than that, but I don't want it to be any smaller because I want it to have some weight and some consistency. I don't want it to be like, like baby food. So what we're going to do is we're going to fortify it a little bit with some whole wheat breadcrumbs. Croutons. Whole wheat croutons. You could use breadcrumbs. I like to use croutons, one, because they're a little bit more flavorful, so I don't have to add any salt to this. And it gives a little bit more crunch. So when I fry it, it's going to give me a nice crispy finish a little bit easier. So I'm just going to add a little bit of breadcrumbs, and then we're going to pulse that into it. And that looks pretty good. So now we've got our protein done, and now we've got our vegetable done. What I'm going to do with this is I'm going to turn this into a little bit of a patty. So I'm going to go ahead and get the cast iron skillet going. And I'm going to add some more oil to it. And I'm going to add a little bit more oil than I did with the fish. I don't want to deep fry this, but I do want to get a little bit of a fry on the outside of it. And again, because this is all vegetables and processed foods, I'm not actually trying to cook this. I'm just warming it through and giving it a coating on the outside. So I'm going to take a handful of it. And it's not, I'm just making a little patty like that. And then I'm going to do something interesting. While it's in my hand, I'm going to add a little bit of oyster sauce to it.
Wow.
The reason I do that now and not in the food processor, one is because oyster sauce has kind of a lot of sugar in it. So if you're a diabetic, you want to go easy on that. It's just really, really messy in the food processor, and I don't like having to clean it out. So I do it on the outside of the patty. Also, I want the sugar on the outside because the sugar will burn more easily, so it will make it brown faster.
Okay.
So I'm going to wait for my oil to come up to temperature. And I, like my grandmother, I just take a wet hand and I just flick the oil, and that's how I know when it's ready.
Right, when you hear it's crackling and popping.
When I hear that crackle, that's when it's ready. That's how my grandmother did it, so it's how I do it.
Yeah, that's when you know.
Yeah. And of course, if you were doing this vegetarian, you would leave out the seafood. You wouldn't add the squid or the mussels into this if you were doing a vegetarian option. Okay. And if you were serving a vegetarian, as opposed to making these smaller, side dish size ones, you would just make a more substantial size one. You would make it the size of a main. And I'll show you what we would serve with it. All right, so I hear the sizzling. So I'm going to go ahead and put my first one down. And I'm going to make another. My niece and nephew are only half of the week. They're with their mom the other half of the week. So when I cook things like this, I'll put the rest of it in these little muffin tins so that when they do come home, it's easy for me to just like pop it out and throw it in the oven or fry it up. Or if I cook them, it's easy for them to just throw it in the microwave. Kids will make you come up with some time-saving ideas.
All right, crackling.
Yeah, I'm gonna rinse my hands off. And I've got my light on high because again, I'm not trying to cook this. I just want to scorch it on the outside, and that's it.
Right.
Now, one of the things that people get hung up on when they're cooking, especially if you watch like a cook on TV, is that you don't get it to come out the way that they do, right? That's because they've made it 14 times just to show it to you that one time on TV, and it failed. It failed all the other times. When I practiced this dish, it worked about like 2 out of the 4 times that I tried it, and just now it broke apart in this pan, which is fine. You just improvise. So instead of having 2, I push them together, and I'm just going to pour them in the pan, and we'll have one big one instead of 2 little ones.
Awesome.
And that's that.
Worked.
And that's a great point because it's never going to turn out.
No.
Sometimes, well, I'm not going to say it's never going to turn out, but sometimes it's just not going to turn out. But then again, you might have a happy accident, is what they call it.
Exactly. It will.
So you just improvise.
Exactly. Right. And a lot of people get frustrated, but the reality of it is, cooking is about experimenting and figuring it out.
It's
gotta roll with it.
Yeah, it's about improvisation.
Exactly.
Improvisation.
Okay, now this is more or less done. It's hard for me to see where I'm showing. All right, so that's more or less done. You see it's getting brown around the edges.
Oh, wow.
So this doesn't feel like a complete meal to me, right? Because we don't really have a starch, right? So we've got a protein, we've got a vegetable. I want to give you a starch if we're going to have a real meal. So what I do, I'm going to go ahead and take this fish off of the heat, and I'm going to turn the heat off of the vegetable. I'm going to take my uncle's wok. I'm going to turn the heat up really, really high. I'm going to add some oil to it. And then I'm going to add a couple of things. I'm going to bring you over here with me. I'm going to add a couple of things to this wok, if you can see. I'm going to add some fresh garlic, roughly a teaspoon. And I'm going to add some carrots. And the reason I'm adding carrots is because they're sweet and because they came in the package of broccoli that I brought. I'm going to turn my light down just a little bit. And then lastly, I'm going to add some tomatoes. And I'm going to add them in whole. They're just cherry tomatoes.
Okay.
And I'm not even going to cut them. Now, before I got on the call today, I made a batch of starch. So I like to mix it up. Every Sunday, I usually make 2 cups of a starch. Sometimes it's brown rice, sometimes it's farro, and sometimes it's quinoa. Today I'm using black, red, and white quinoa. Quinoa. So in this case, this is what it looks like.
Yeah,
So for those of you who haven't had it,
I've had it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's got an interesting consistency, almost like tapioca bubbles a little bit. A lot of people don't like it, and it is not the most flavorful grain in the whole world. But what it is a superfood. It's high in protein, fiber, omega acids, and a host of other things that are super, 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 super good for you. It also cooks in about half the time that rice takes to cook.
Awesome.
I'm going to do a riff on fried rice. So I'm going to just take the quinoa that I've already made, and I'm going to dump a couple of scoops of it into this wok. And you'll notice I took the wok kind of off the heat once it came up to temperature to add in the rice, and I'll put it back. And then I'm going to just give it a stir with those simple vegetables that I added.
Nice. That's going to come out really. I already know that's going to come out really well.
Yeah. And now I need to take it to another level. I need to reference the flavors that I was putting in that fish, right? And I need to reference the flavors that I was putting in that vegetable, because we want to go with an Asian theme. So, generally speaking, you always want to have an acid component to your food. If you don't have a salt, a sweet, a savory, and an acid, your food will taste sort of flat in one note. Depth of flavor comes from adding those different things that hit the different parts of your tongue differently. So I'm going to add, and acid just means any kind of vinegar, lemon juice, anything that's acidic. So I'm going to add a little bit of citrus ponzu sauce. So it's just a lemon lime flavored soy sauce.
What is it?
It's called ponzu.
A lemon lime flavored soy sauce?
It's like a soy sauce.
Okay, soy sauce.
Yeah. So I'm using a low sodium variety, but I'm not adding any salt to the rice. And when I cook the quinoa, I don't add any salt to it when I cook it. It's just water and the quinoa. And then lastly, I talked about how Asian and Caribbean flavors are often similar. Yes. I'm going to take the allspice component that you would find in like a jerk chicken. You would find there's a little allspice, clove, and all those sorts of flavors. It's the same flavoring that goes into a Chinese 5-spice. I'm going to use just the allspice component, which is going to add like a sort of a warm note that brings out the sweetness without being like cloyingly sweet. And then it helps when I add in the red pepper flake. For people who don't like to have too much heat, it gives you a sweet note to balance out some of that heat. I love really, really spicy food. So for me, I might add ghost pepper, but since my brother probably will eat this, I'm going to just use red pepper flakes. So I'm going to add a little red pepper.
Awesome. Very warm.
Yep. Now, I'm looking at this, and I put 2 scoops of the rice in there. I'm actually going to add a little bit more so that it absorbs a little bit more of the soy sauce. And we are ready to plate this meal.
Wow.
Hmm. It probably smells very, very good.
It's not. I mean,
I'm
it's
sure it
not. Yeah,
does.
the clove and the garlic and the ginger.
All of
It's
those
really really.
seasonings are coming together
Yeah,
now,
it's all
and
coming together.
they're creating like a potpourri of different types of
Mm-hmm.
smells and that sort of a thing,
Exactly.
and then you got different types of textures going on there with the food as well. So I already know that that is quite delicious. You know what you're making.
So we're gonna go ahead and get this on the plate.
Awesome.
Like,
That's
All right.
probably very colorful too.
yeah, and that's the other thing you want to think about when you're making a dish like this, or any dish really, is you want to think about how it's going to look when you present it. Like obviously, if it's just for yourself, like when it is just myself, I still plate my food and garnish it because why not for myself? But
Hmm.
especially if you're having like people over, it's a special occasion or whatever. Taking
Mm-hmm.
like the couple of extra minutes that it takes to think about how you put the plate on the food on the plate makes a difference. And people eat with their eyes before they eat with their nose or their tongues.
They
So it's
sure
the
do.
first way. It's the first
Yes.
way that you're convincing people that what you're going to give them is good.
Right. If it looks good, they will. I worked at a gourmet supermarket, so if it looks good, they will buy it. They will, a
Yep.
lot of times they won't even question. They'll make question what it is, but they'll buy it just from looking at it.
Yep.
You know,
Look good and smell good.
And
I
I'm
can
going to go
smell it
ahead
from
and
here. I know that is very, very delicious what he's
Mm-hmm.
making, and very colorful too as well.
Yes.
And then
I'm
of
going to go ahead.
course on top of that, being flavorful and healthy for you. So awesome, just awesome.
And then the last thing we're going to do, which I tend to always do when I am plating food, is I like to add a little bit of parsley and just a touch of salt to the outside of the food
Garnish.
garnish.
Right.
I should mention I'm not using sea salt. I'm using kosher salt because
Okay.
kosher salt is a little bit lower in sodium taste wise.
Mm-hmm.
Like sea salt, it doesn't have iodine in it the way table salt does. But sea salt is actually very easy to oversalt your food. Like what feels right when you're using a thing of sea salt can actually come out being far saltier than you think. In particular, when you're using lighter things like seafood. So I
Okay.
tend to use kosher salt when I'm making fish.
Right. I use the pink Himalayan salt.
Yeah, now that's
Mm-hmm.
nice salt. Yeah,
I
that's
use
a
that. I don't use the.
yeah,
I've gotten away from the. I use the raw sugar, the
yeah.
stevia. I think it's called the
Right.
stevo. I got it here.
Stevia. Yeah,
Yeah, the stevia, raw sugar, and then I use the pink Himalayan salt. I don't. I've gotten
yep,
away from the white stuff
yep,
because they said that was that's bad for us for our health as a people.
yep. From a refined. Yeah, it's refined and overly processed.
Right.
So what we're left with is a plate. Hold on. It looks something like like that. Can
Hmm.
you see that?
Wow. Wow. Look at that.
Wow.
Wow. Look how
I wish you
colorful that is.
could.
That is
Yeah.
I wish you could
beautiful.
push that through the screen.
Right. Put it up to the screen. Put it up to the screen.
So in not very much time, we got a
Yeah,
very
that was it.
flavorful, colorful
Mm-hmm.
meal. And other than the 20 minutes it took the 15, 20 minutes it took to make the quinoa ahead of time, all of that was done in real time. Um,
Yes.
so
Wow.
if you choose the right things, you can get what looks like a pretty nice meal, not your average
Oh,
Thursday
wow.
night dinner,
Mm-hmm.
in no time flat. So, and again,
Awesome.
the calorie components, the fat, the salt, all of those things are relatively low and would fit into any kind of a diet for people who were battling any kind of a health issue. I would give this to my grandmother, who's a diabetic, as is my mother.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them have heart issues. So these are very useful, easy meals. And you could substitute the vegetable. If you didn't have broccoli and you had sweet potatoes, you could make that exact same thing with a sweet potato. You just have to boil it ahead of time instead of just throwing it right into the food
Right.
processor. You could
Mm.
use brown
Okay.
rice instead of the quinoa. You could not go with the rice at all and just use more of the vegetable mixture and add a little bit more potato to it. It could be any seafood or fish. You could do that same seasoning to shrimp. So there's a lot of different ways that you can take a meal like this, and thinking about your food in flexible ways is what's going to have you eating healthier and it not feeling like it's an imposition, especially if you're not doing it right now. You want to look for ways to make your new diet not feel like it's a hassle, because you won't stick to it.
Awesome.
So that's what I got for you guys.
Awesome.
And that was absolutely amazing.
That was, yeah. I definitely want the all of the. I'm going to try my hand at that. So
well, yeah, he said he was going to like.
Really, yeah, I will type. Yeah, I'll type out the recipe instructions, and I'll send it to you so you can post it.
Right, and then when Cortez, when you send it to me, I'll come back here and I'll put it in the chat, and then I'll also go up on YouTube, and I got to put it in the description on YouTube as well. And what's your YouTube? And Brother Eddie Miles, what's your YouTube channel again?
It's the Pan African Family Cooking Channel.
Send that to Cortez, and I'll put that in the chat as well, and I'll put it in the description on Facebook.
On
and then I'll tell people to
it's the same name on Facebook and Instagram. Yep.
Okay, good. Because I'll put it in the description, and and then have people subscribe to you, and that's how we support one another.
Yeah,
but
and absolutely. That's that community. That's that community engagement and unity that we're talking about. And I think that if our people can do things like this, resistance comes in so many forms, and with it being Black August, which is about resistance, food resistance is imperative. It is so important that we resist. If we're worried about a vaccine, you should absolutely be worried about what they're putting into your body via the food, the food industry, and understanding what to look at, what to look for, and also some of the historical connections to things like quinoa, which, like farro, is an ancient grain that has its origins back to the Kemetic regions of the Fertile Rift.
Okay. That was absolutely amazing the way you whipped that together. And I'm sure the audience, and I don't know, is Tony still in here or whoever else? He
is gone. He really showed out today. And next time you talk to that brother, thank that brother.
Yeah,
but I'm gonna thank him personally for showing up. Brother Eddie Miles Jr., thank you for your excellent commentary, excellent, enlightening commentary, and powerful commentary. And of course, thank you for that excellent meal. I can smell it from here. And I know it's very, very tasteful in the way that because you use a lot of warm flavors and a lot of warm seasonings, and then the different textures. So I know it's just delicious. I wish I could have it.
I will enjoy it on your behalf.
I told you that he's a brilliant brother.
Yes, he is. Like, wow.
On a discussion.
Well, I definitely appreciate you having me on, brother Alex. It was a pleasure meeting you and chopping it up with you, and I'm always down to come together with our people who are about our people. So I appreciate that.
Wow,
you're welcome.
Thank you for coming and spending like your genius and your energy and your time with us. We're truly grateful here at King Talk. And of course, you can come back. We'll do a whole cooking show.
Yeah, definitely.
So
I'll definitely now that I know I can do it live. I have a little bit more confidence. I was worried because I've never done this before. So live.
Right.
Well, you did amazing. You were good and natural with it. So
right. And didn't take that long either. Just whipped it right on up, and it was excellent and didn't even really take that long to cook. I think it was like under 20 minutes, under 30 minutes, which is excellent, to make a full meal like that. So just awesome. So is there anything, this is our season finale, fam. So we are going to be leaving, for the remainder of August. We're going to pick it back up in September, and hopefully we can bring it more in a live setting We don't know as far as, all of the restrictions, that are concerned now. So we're just working on it. So just bear with us, family. But you're going to be going for a little minute without seeing us. So, as we try to bring King Talk to you in a better way and in a more organic, and shall we say, more free flowing way, without this vacuum that we're dealing with right now. At least that's what we want to do. So
yeah, the goal has always been to have it in a live
in a lot,
studio or setting. But of course, this whole pandemic thing happened. And
right?
so that changed how we could do it for now. As things were starting to open back up, but now they seem like they're trying to restrict things again. We'll see. We'll just have to roll with it.
We will see, family. But
right.
we're gonna, if it's anything that my esteemed co-host Cortez Ransom or the esteemed brother Eddie Miles wanted to say before I start the music.
No, I just appreciate you for having me, and I want to remind everybody to always think Black first.
Awesome.
Always. I'm always about being Black first. That's what I'm all about. That's how I live. That's how I write. That's how I handle my artistry and so forth. And I'm happy, that my film, The Eternal Esther, got into the Detroit Black Film Festival. Very happy
congratulations.
about that. Well,
congratulations, brother. Yeah.
Thank you. I was hoping to be able to go to Detroit, but at this point, I don't know if that's going to happen with the restrictions that's happening now. So hopefully it'll be able to be in person, but it may have to be virtual again. We'll see.
Okay. And I am Alex Iowas, and I'm just always happy, to be here and build, with my beautiful brothers, my beautiful people, and that's it. I'm always I just want to be present, and be everything and all that I can be in the liberation and in the empowerment of our people.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Ashe.
With that being said,
have a good evening, everyone.
This is the season finale of King Talk, and we're leaving you right now, fam.
Season finale 1. Bye, fam.
Bye, fam. I'll call you, Cortez.
All right.
All right. All right, family. Thank you for the fam that did show up, today for us. Make sure that you head over to the King Talk page on YouTube and like and subscribe there, family. We do need the help. And thank you for all of the support on the King Talk Black page or on Facebook as well. I am Alex Iwas, and I'm signing off. Love you, fam. Peace, power, and soul.